We're recording.
Hello and welcome to another Rust WebAssembly Working Group meeting.
Wow.
Oh my gosh, your antics are so good.
There we go. There's not too much on the agenda today, but last time we did all of our planning for this 6-week sprint. So all we have on the agenda today is kind of like updates on how that's going. And if you have anything else you want to add to the agenda, just like throw it down there in the Dropbox paper link, and we'll get to that when we're done with the status updates. So first off is WASM bindgen and WebSysy type things. And the big item here is that yesterday we finished all of the JSSys bindings. They're completely done, and we closed that big issue. So I was like, I think it was 394 different bindings altogether. And it took us 3 months and 1 day, which was almost 5 API bindings every day. So yeah, thanks to everyone who helped contribute to that. I think I'll probably write up a little mini blog post and throw that onto the Rust WASM blog, just to tell a wider audience.
So just on the topic of WebSys and JSSys, I happened to get dinner with Dan Ehrenberg who works on TC39, and he was really excited about our work with WebSys using WebIDL, and apparently was trying to push TC39 to try and do something similar for JavaScript, just kind of comparing our WebSys and JSSys experiences. So I don't know. I think that blog post would be a really great thing to talk about because they might use it in evaluating future ideas on, developing JavaScript and standardizing
it. What do you mean doing a similar thing for JavaScript, like using WebIDL for JavaScript? Or?
To do an IDL type situation, like instead of just having like word spec, to have a programmatic spec, and there's a question of is the complexity worth it or not? And I think the WebSys crate is kind of like a cool testament to it being kind of worth it. But like talking honestly about the experience, I think would be a great like experience report. Like people are watching this, so
yeah, it seems like a lot of that story is probably more for once we publish WebSys itself rather than just JSSys. But I agree, we should definitely post stuff about that. Other WebSys updates is we realized that the way we were exposing global methods was actually not correct. So we were doing static methods on window. And then I forget their name, but they've done a bunch of Rust bindgen bugs too. They were like, hey, what about like iframes that have their own window? Like, how do I call like the iframes window.alert? And we were just like, oh crap. We don't have a way to do that. So now instead there's like a getter to get the global window object, and then everything that was like a static method on Windows, an instance method. Yeah.
Do we have any feels on like exactly when we think WebSys is gonna be published? Like an estimate? Or, like, are we aiming for something specific? Obviously, I think before the edition.
Yeah, I think I would say probably in the next like week or two. What do you think of that, Alex?
I think the major thing that hasn't happened is kind of like an audit, so like basically just doing a once over again. But other than that, I do agree. I think we're basically ready, and like there are gonna be mistakes. There's gonna be stuff that's gonna break, but I think 1 to 2 weeks is a good estimate. Like we should set a deadline for ourselves at the next meeting to check in again on the WebSys published, and we should probably have done it by then.
Okay, so looking at the checkboxes for what's not checked here, because we kept kind of discovering more stuff and adding them. We have add a working example of using the DOM via WebSys. Honestly, like we probably don't need that. I think we have enough examples now, although of course it's nice to have. There's like do the final audit, like what you were talking about of like all of the, so everything that we don't support in WebIDL, we have a warning for. And so we can do an audit of all the warnings that we generate and like make sure that none of them are critical. And then like also audit for Moz prefixed APIs that shouldn't actually be exposed to the web. And then write an announcement blog post. Like, yeah, that's really close. I think basically it's just the audit is the real blocker and the blog post.
I mean, I don't think we necessarily have to rush, but I think if we could commit to having WebSys published, you know, for this 6-week sprint so that the next 6 weeks can be like polished, I think that's good. And it sounds like we're like very squarely going to do it in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So seems good.
And it was actually supposed to be published like the last 6-week thing. And we were like pretty much ready, but we just wanted to like hold off and just see what's going on. And I think that's good because like people have been actually using it before we even published it. And we've been getting all this great feedback.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So, do you want to do the audit? Can you own that, Alex?
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I'll whip up a blog post. Cool.
On the WebSys front, one thing that I was thinking about in regards to WASMPack is the WebSys is all the APIs the browser exposes, right? Just so clear.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, especially because we've been doing all this module shenanigans, which I'm sure I'll bring up, is that if a cargo package has WebSys as a package and they try and export it for Node to warn or something like that. Like give a little help that like, hey, you're using a thing and it might not like work at all on the platform you just told us to export for.
Yeah.
Not to like error because maybe they're doing some fun checking and polyfilling or whatever. But I don't know. I was thinking it might be like a useful synergy between two things, like a way to like help move people in the right direction. So
yeah, I think warning is good because people could be doing like feature detection or something, right? And like so we definitely don't want a hard error. Yeah. Okay. Do you want to jump into any other WebSys or WASM-Bindgen updates? No? Okay. Do you want to talk about WASMPack, Ashley?
Sure. So I've been trying to get a bunch of things going on WASMPack because it's been quite a long time since we had a release. And what's on master right now is pretty heavily diverged from our last release. Plus, as numerous people on the issue tracker have mentioned, and thank you for the people mentioning it, we kind of fell into this situation where the documentation we have is, as someone put it, from the future, which I thought was a great way to say it. So our documentation is in kind of a poopy spot, which is my fault. And we're getting lots of issues on it, which frankly is kind of awesome because it shows that people are trying to use it. But I would really like to get a release out as soon as possible. I was really hoping for this week. Our biggest blocker for O5 is related to downloading WASM-Bindgen as a binary, which is also, I think, next to documentation, probably the least fun UX experience and one that we've gotten several bug reports for. Someone filed a report yesterday saying that the first run of WASMPack and it took an hour on their machine, which really blows, like hard. So don't want that to be a thing. And what we have on master should improve it, but we can't ship that until it respects the cargo lock file. So I've been trying to get in touch with Datapop, and I was able to actually right before this meeting on Twitter, and it just turns out they're moving and their current residence doesn't have wireless yet or any internet. So Twitter is definitely the best way to get in touch with them. And they say that they are going to work on the issue tonight/tomorrow because they noticed that it's blocking. So while my goal of getting WASMPack out this week might not work, I do think that we should not wait any later than early next week. And so there'll be that. The biggest change that just landed on WASMPack actually has to do with a really fantastic conversation that Alex, Sindil, Nick, and I had with Brian Turlson, who works at Microsoft, does a bunch of JavaScript stuff, does TC39 stuff, about modules. And so the patch that I had that landed this morning does a lot better job of leveraging packaged JSON keys to appropriately handle the type of module output that we're giving it. So now if you target Node.js, you'll get your common JS module, and that will be listed under the main key. But now for the default, and if you like choose ES6, we will not put anything in main, because putting ES6 in main does nothing. Instead, we will put the ES6 module in a key called module. And we will also add side effects equals false, which means that most popular bundlers will be able to do tree shaking on it. So if anybody has strong feelings about that, I tried to leverage my internet network yesterday to see, like, if I have an ES6 module, like, is there any reason to put anything in main? And frankly, there was like not much response. The largest response was from the TSC director of Node trying to get me to use MJS, which every time he suggested I do that it included like, be careful, there's edge case, like horrible failures, and also there's dragons. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to use that until it's stabilized. So if people have feelings about that, I think it would be great for people to share. There's an issue open about this. Additionally, somebody filed an issue today about getting WASM-Pack support for the no modules flag that WASM BindGen has. And they mentioned it's because that some bundlers require that. And so I followed up with them to try and see which ones, just because I'm like genuinely curious. But that conversation that we had about like auditing what flags WASM BindGen has, and making sure that either we deprecate them on WASM BindGen or we give them support in WASM-Pack, it's probably something you and I should do, Alex and Nick, or whoever wants to do it. Yeah, and with that, I think that's most of the updates. I guess the one final thing is I have been talking with some folks, and this is partially why the documentation PR is taking me so long. But I realized that we actually don't have any documentation for people wanting to use WASM-Pack with Node. And there's been a lot of ask for a landing page that will help people navigate the documentation. Like you land and it says, I'm a JavaScript developer and I want to build a Node library. I'm a JavaScript developer and I want to build a library for like both, or like for the browser, or I like want to build a library alongside an app. And so I'm slowly constructing something that should help do that. We're going to have some holes probably, because I don't think I can get all the documentation done before I want to do the release. But it was a big hole in our docs that I realized we had. So that's it. Hopefully that was enough. I feel like I just talked for an hour.
All right, what's next? Bundler stuff. Is Sven on the call or Sindil?
Yep, I'm here on the call. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
any updates?
nothing much in the last.
Powen says that they have an update in the chat.
Okay. Okay, so I'll add that as a bullet point to the bottom here. Okay. So there was no bundler updates, Sindil?
Yep. So one update that I do have, I added a point in the sheet there. It's like I need to create a repository because I have done something for this with the event generator. It's basic thing whatever we have the Rust WebAssembly template. I'm just trying to do that with the event generator. I'm almost done with that. So I'm just thinking of moving that into Rust WebAssembly repo and then use it from there and then carry it forward. So that's what my plan was. So probably I need a repo there. So can someone help me with creating a repo?
This is the one where you say like which bundler do you like to use, and we'll set it up however you like. My impression was that that was going to be part of Create WASM app. Is that not what we're planning?
I thought like instead of having different templates for different bundlers, we will couple them together and have it as a single project. And then inside the single project, you can specify a bundler and then create templates. That's what my plan was. I think that's what I think that came to me. So that I don't know. I don't know how to put that, but
that was my understanding. But my understanding was just that we were going to do it in Create WASM app. And Create WASM app would take the argument and then set up your project with either Webpack or Rollup or whatever we end up deciding to support.
Okay, but yeah, fine. So I just have to modify and create WASM app and then put the source code instead of the source code that is already there. Or do we have
Where is it right now? I'm sorry. I guess I'm like vaguely not following, so I apologize.
Hey, okay, so there are two things now. You have a template and you also have a create WASM app. So I've created a thing that's basically human generated that helps you to bootstrap your application. That's it.
Okay, yeah, sorry. I do think that we should have Yeoman, but I do genuinely think we need to also maintain the NPM init thing, just because in my experience, like there are a set of people who use Yeoman, but a lot of people don't. And one of the big things about our tooling is we really don't want to force people to use certain things.
Yep.
So I think the Yeoman thing is like a huge value add, but I do not think it's where we should stop.
Okay, so but basically what I'm trying to do is like I'm not forcing users to install Yeoman there. I'm creating a CLI wrapper to it. So this CLI wrapper, it's like just calling Rust WASM and then it asks you setup question and then it creates. So you have a CLI kind of thing that helps you to invoke Yeoman, which is inside that library itself.
All right, maybe, I mean, if it's up on GitHub, just requesting reviews, maybe I just have to look at it.
Yeah, okay, so I'll push it, but I'm thinking like, okay, so I'll push it under my repo now, but probably I was thinking like whether to create a repo in Rust WASM and then push it inside there such that it lives there.
I think we can you can just push it to Rust WASM, and if we end up deciding we want to move it to another repo, we can just do that. But I personally don't think there's any harm in kind of like putting everything in Rust WASM, and then if we decide we want to combine stuff later, we just combine it. Maybe I'm wrong though. I don't know, Nick, if you have any opinion.
So, yeah, sure. So what would the repo name be?
I'll ping you, Nick.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I can get that set up. All right. Documentation. Gatosi is not here today.
So one thing I can say is Gatosi is starting a new job, and so he's available for reviews, but not really. Like, we should probably reassign docs to somebody for like at least a little while. I don't think it would be like offensive to him, but he knows that he has not that much time.
I guess I'm probably the best person to take it then. I don't have any updates here. We have a bunch of goals, but I've been working on a presentation I'm giving next week. So I haven't really contributed much. All right. And I think we can skip everything else. Website debugging template. Templates really, I feel, part of Bundler. Maybe we should merge those in the list. Does that make sense to other people? Like, I feel like every time we talk about bundlers, we actually are talking about templates. And every time we talk about templates, we're actually talking about bundlers. Like, it just seems the same thing.
I mean, I think it's because the vast majority of the work on bundlers that at least we have control over is in the templates. But there is the whole, like, work with bundlers for support kind of shenanigans. But there's just not a lot of progress ever on that. So when we hit the bundler section, we don't ever talk about it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on. All right, Sandil,
Yep.
you have an item here.
Yes. Okay, so I had a meeting. I had a meetup yesterday, on Tuesday. So I was showcasing everything. But one good thing that they've asked us, like whether we have something like a performance thing that we can showcase with the people. For example, somebody wants to try Rust and WASM together, but they don't have anything to showcase the performance. They can tell people like you can do this, that with WASM engine, but there is no obvious example for us even to try out the performance stuff, which I think is a valid question from those guys. Probably we are also focusing more on performance. It's better to have some performance-based thingy there, and then probably ask people to look into that. Look, you can achieve this kind of performance in your application. Probably something like that based on that.
So I think the best thing to point people to right now is the source maps article from Hacks. I just posted it in there.
Yeah.
Like we've talked about this before, that like we don't want to get into the like writing and maintaining a benchmark game because that's hard work and like also not really our job. Like browser vendors and such things will like handle this. And there's also a bunch of other just examples of people like doing WebAssembly things and making it faster.
Definitive benchmarks can be really complicated and usually incentivize people like in the wrong direction would be like my vibe. So keeping it to like a collection of personal experiences, I think is just like a healthier way to go about it. Because there's so many aspects of performance that just like your choice of language like doesn't like there's a lot of other things that can affect the performance, and so like it can be very difficult to have like useful benchmarks.
I've also found that when anyone asks about performance, they're actually thinking about a very specific thing, and they probably know how to write it already in one language. And so, if we could just make it super easy to write it in both like JS and Rust, and have it like a little template, a small template to be like, oh, here's how you benchmark things, like here's how to easily time that and time this. So having something like that, people would just copy and paste and do it. So not necessarily a benchmark suite, but like a little bit of an idea about how to write a benchmark. That might be good as well.
Yeah,
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, so like I have had this idea kicking in the back of my head for a while of porting Criterion to work with WASM. And so Criterion, if anyone's not familiar, is like a custom benchmark thing for Rust. And it's really awesome in that like it allows you to save like a control, which would be like your unmodified master. And then you can like make a bunch of changes and then you do like comparison to control, and it like, you know, tells you if changes are statistically significant and like, you know, shows you if it's faster or whatever. And it's super nice. And I think like having that ready and being like, do you want to benchmark something? Like here's like the way to benchmark like Rust compiled to WASM. That could be really helpful for, I guess, like teaching people how to fish, helping people solve their own problems and make their own comparisons. Puan, do you have any more update, or should I just read what you've already written into chat for the recording? Okay, so Futures 03 support has landed in standard web. It's not merged yet, sorry, so it hasn't landed. There's some issues with it breaking stable in beta Rust. But yeah, that is coming down the pipe. Cool. All right. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to talk about while we're all together?
So one thing that we have talked about in the past that I am getting some pressure from my management to do something about is the idea of adoption and in particular outreach to library authors. And so I know at least the management I have at Mozilla has been talking about this a whole bunch. And one of the things that we have had as like a vague goal is to have some set of, libraries or frameworks in the JavaScript ecosystem with whom we've worked with to have them rewrite, a small portion of it in WebAssembly. And especially because the next 12 weeks are going to be like very huge for WasMPack. I know that like I really can't personally do that work. And so particularly if there's any folks in this meeting who have a JavaScript library or maybe have connections in the JavaScript ecosystem who are interested in doing, it's not quite evangelism work here, but like trying to help, see if we can't get some like particular types of adoption and work with library authors, like our actual audience. I think it would be good at least to start getting those conversations happening so that for our last 6-week sprint, we can at least be actively working with folks or something like that. I don't know what your vibe is on it, Nick, but I know that at least in not these meetings, there's been like a ton of chatter about this kind of stuff.
I haven't been hearing too much like directly, but it is a thing that comes up every now and then. I think it would be worth like talking to Yehuda again and like figuring out what the status is with all the Glimmer stuff, and like maybe we can help push that forward again.
I'm hesitant only because, and Alex, you can correct me, but my understanding is that the work with Glimmer was largely a spike by Alex, which has, at this point, is pretty strongly diverged from what we currently have, right?
It hasn't really diverged because we haven't really changed anything. I mean, in terms of like workflow, it was never wed to our current workflow, so it's not hooked in with that at all. So like workflow-wise, it has quite diverged. Code-wise, it's pretty similar, but I don't think that this is a viable option. I think, especially in like the time frame that we're looking at in terms of wanting to see adoption and wanting to get feedback, I don't think Glimmer is at all ready for that kind of thing. Glimmer is on a much longer time scale, and like they don't have the resources to dedicate to like review and these kinds of things just yet.
I think additionally, and like this is not just like if the Glimmer folks do end up wanting to work with us, I think that that's really awesome. I would like to try and get a more like, so the JavaScript ecosystem is full of these like tiny little libraries that do like an immense amount of heavy lifting across the ecosystem because they're like buried all the way down at the bottom of the dependency graph for like lots of things. And these libraries tend to do the types of work that I think WASM would be very good for. Like these are things like regex stuff, any type of like parsing. And so I think especially, it's too bad that Corbin isn't here, but like I've definitely been having conversations with people in the Node world where they like really love the idea of a future where native modules are done in WebAssembly. And so like one of the things that I think would be great to try and work on is a Niguruma, and I might be pronouncing that incorrectly, but it's like a regex library. It's in C, and it's used in the Atom ecosystem, like Highlights.js, which is notoriously kind of like everybody I think would agree that Highlights.js could use a boost with like either speed or really just like a regular like memory usage, not what is currently happening. But I think trying to find like more foundational libraries will be good for several reasons. One, because they'll be used upstream by tons of things, but also they tend to be a lot smaller and usually don't have like huge teams working on them, and it's probably a lot easier to like work with like a single maintainer. Because that might be nice. And like additionally, something that's very interesting is like a ton of people want a Niguruma and WASM so badly that there's like several versions of it already in the NPM ecosystem that might benefit from like maybe some guidance or some more tooling, because I know that some of them had like performance problems and other stuff. But it's definitely like a problem that you see people already trying to fix. So that seems like low-hanging fruit for us to go check out.
I do see the foundational library as a little bit of a double-edged sword, where like it's really good in terms of getting it out there and like also driving our like what we're doing ourselves, because like that has a lot of like production quality style stuff, like how do I work in IE11? How do I work in older versions of Node? Can I have like a fallback C extension compiled seamlessly, things like that. But that's like the other side of the sword as well. Is like a lot of times these foundational libraries, they make the most sense, but they're also the most difficult to actually get WASM into due to all like the various constraints they're running into. So I
That's
would
totally fair.
it might be because like and they're like I would never want to say no. Like if I guess what I'm saying is like the amount of buy-in we would need from someone who's already maintaining these packages would be pretty high. Like they'd have to be willing to put up with a lot of like weird corners while we fix things ourselves and while we get support in like bundlers and things like that. And so like that, it might be kind of hard to get that. That would be great to do it if we can. But the other alternative is that we could just kind of I like the idea of kind of polishing our workflow like as much as possible, in the sense that like not necessarily like core libraries, but like start some like satellite libraries, like much farther out, or like weekend style projects, or like people just trying to get things running. And it's like they get to that point really really easily, where we're not quite on the trajectory to say like we're firmly seated in the npm ecosystem just yet, but we're like kind of getting all the initial waves. Everyone's like, oh wow, this is like super usable, and like I did publish a small thing, and like I used it in my app and it was really easy. But and then eventually we like go farther and farther down as we kind of like fix more things, and like that at least it like both of these are fine to like pursue at any point in time, but one of them going for kind of like the top level projects that aren't necessarily as core might have more people to initially try it out, as opposed to that. And I mean,
sense.
it's not real. It's really, we can't really like focus on this per se. We can't like rally everyone like, hey, go write some Rust and WebAssembly. I mean, like we can do that, but it's not as useful as just. So it's not really clear about like what we could do to help this along per se.
Yeah, I guess for me, one thing that I feel like I've noticed is a lot there, at least on the WASM pack issue tracker, we're slowly getting more and more JS users, at least based on like, I know that they're JS users because they're talking about presenting at a JS event. And so I'm like, okay, probably a JS person. But I do think we get a lot of feedback from Rust people. And I just want to try and get more JavaScript folks involved, particularly JavaScript folks that are working within like the strong, like not like periphery so much as like within like the actually strong constraints of the JS ecosystem. Like I'm particularly curious about like like the module stuff that we're doing now and how that will work out, and just getting a lot of people to bang on that, just because there's no like definitive source of making sure that we're doing it the right way beyond throwing it in the world and making sure it doesn't break anybody. So, and like I think we've learned this lesson like a little bit from the Rust edition, because like we're kind of bumping into it right now. But I want to make sure we don't just assume that the usage that we are getting organically is representative.
Right. That makes sense.
That's like the big thing, and that's why I do think this outreach stuff could be nice, just so that we can make sure that like the people who are looking at it should.
So kind of related, I've been finding people in the Mozilla office here who have like a lot of web development background, and like people who have ideally like looked at Rust before, because I don't really want to teach Rust from like the ground up. And I've been like talking to them about the idea of like scheduling an afternoon where like they just build a thing with Rust and WASM, like whether that's the Game of Life tutorial or like something else, doesn't really matter. But like they just build it, and I'm just there to like answer questions and see what issues they run into. And like I feel like these same people would be really good people to reach out to about like potentially having projects, or knowing like what projects do you depend on that like you kind of are annoyed with in terms of, you know, either, you know, performance or memory usage or what.
Yeah. One thing I can say is we do have a bunch of like JavaScript focused workshops coming up, both GitHub Universe, and I think that Steve is going to do one at Smash and Conf just by himself because I'm going to be at TPAC with y'all. But maybe trying to do a little bit more of that and might help get more inbound stuff. Like I do think I think his name is Tejas. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce it, so apologies to you. But he showed up on the issue tracker, had an interesting bug that I now know how to fix. But he, at least part of his presentation on WebAssembly was doing Hello World live in this presentation. And so encouraging folks to also do that might help just get people aware of this tooling. Because while people associate Rust and WebAssembly together, some people are not familiar with our tooling. I was just talking with Gary Bernhardt because he was talking about Rust and WASM on Twitter, and I was like, which tool chain did you use? And he was like, I don't even know. And I was like, okay, we got to make this more obvious. So.
All right, lots to think about, and I don't feel like I have a concrete action item, but
I mean, I guess for me, I would definitely agree with doing more outreach at conference style and event style things. Like I actually think that's a really great way to not only kick the tires in what we currently have, but also get the word out to more people in more places. And so like I don't know how to do that, but like one possible action could be like try and figure out a list of conferences. Like do we have places that we can just like send people who know about WASM Bindgen and know about WASM Pack to these places, and kind of like not necessarily us per se, but like try and recruit people and see if they can go there and run workshops or just say intros and things like that.
Yeah, I know one thing, and again, I don't know if I have bandwidth, but maybe, so I have like a couple of repos that are like kind of workshops in a box, but like if we can take the presentation materials that we have and the workshop materials we have, put them somewhere central, and then like in our book be like, take these and use them. Like we would love for you to just like go do your own presentation, go do your own workshop. That might be a really great way to increase that. Because I do think like our Hello World example is like nice and I think impressive enough to like do live coding in a presentation. Like people are usually like, yeah, that's awesome. So maybe just like making it more obvious that we love when people do that.
all right. Anything else? I think we can call it a meeting there. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thanks for your beautiful art, Nick.
All right. See y'all later.